For armed men ring my house at dawn. My hands trembled as I watched them move with the practiced ease of people who'd done this many times, taking positions with chilling precision. They said they had a warrant for my wife, but for what? She hasn't even had a speeding ticket. The lead officer's icy smile crawled under my skin as he demanded we open up. Something about it felt deeply wrong. Then my wife came outside, and those supposedly hard men went pale like they'd seen a specter. In an instant, their whole posture collapsed. What could she possibly have done to make armed adults look terrified? Comment if you want to know what happened next. Monday morning, 8 a.m. sharp. I was getting ready for work when 4 uniformed men fanned out around our house with military-like precision. That sick feeling, something that looks official but feels off, hit me hard as they took up positions like they'd studied our layout for weeks. One avoided the doorbell camera, one stood in the motion sensor blind spot, one at the side gate with the broken latch we kept forgetting to fix. How did strangers know about that lock? Police. We have an arrest warrant for Sarah Thompson. The leader boomed down our quiet street, making curtains twitch. In the 3 years we'd lived here, nobody had done more than wave politely. We'd never seen a dawn raid. My hand shook as my mind raced through possibilities. What could Sarah, who volunteers at the animal shelter and bakes for neighborhood kids, possibly be accused of? And why did these men seem to know our property better than our insurance inspector? From the peephole, it looked legitimate. Sidearms, holsters, clipboards, radios whispering, but their choreography was unnervingly precise. The leader kept checking his watch and peering at our driveway, where Sarah's car sat. Did they know her schedule? Mine? Cold fear crawled up my spine. Real officers don't treat your morning routine like a script. I cracked the door, chain on. Officers, what's this about? The tall, stern leader consulted his paper the way an actor hits marks. Ma'am is wanted for obstruction of investigation and interference with municipal procedures. We need to speak with Sarah Thompson immediately. The phrasing turned my wife into a criminal. Can I see the warrant? I asked. He handed paperwork that would fool a magistrate. County seal, judge's signature, official stamps. Then I froze. The county code read Jefferson County, JIA 2847. We lived in Madison County. Any real cop would know that. Any real warrant would too. This was counterfeit. Expensive, carefully made, but fake. Sir, call your wife now. The leader snapped, urgency sliding into threat. Details kept stacking up. They'd avoided our cameras deliberately. They'd mapped every blind spot. They knew of our broken gate. Another officer stood where our garage sensor never triggers, a weakness I had noticed only a month ago. How could criminals know the skeleton of our security? I shut the door to buy time as the house vibrated with focused attention. Neighbors whispering, radios crackling, boots crunching gravel. My mind landed on the only explanation that fit. Someone had been watching us, logging routines, harvesting data, not actual cops. A team in police costumes, armed with forged documents and intimate knowledge of our home. Michael, Sarah called from upstairs, calm and unknowing. What's happening down there? She had no idea 4 armed men were claiming legal authority to arrest her. Some officers are here. I called back, my voice thin. They say they have a warrant for your arrest. The fake cops shifted like predators, expecting resistance when she appeared. What followed next was a lesson in real authority versus imposture. Sarah stepped out in full Metro Police detective uniform, badge shining, duty belt loaded, radio alive with genuine dispatch traffic. The change in the imposters was instant and brutal. Their confident act cracked like cheap paint, and suddenly the men wielding legal phrases looked like bit players who'd forgotten their lines. The lead's clipboard trembled. One of them took a backward step. Gentlemen, Sarah said, voice steady with earned authority. I'm Detective Sarah Thompson, Metro Police Department, badge 1247. You're attempting to arrest a sworn officer. Her tone carried the calm command of real training, not the school of improv confidence those men had. She didn't escalate. She simply asserted control by being legitimate, like a chess master calmly declaring mate while opponents fumble. The fake officers fumbled too. Ma'am, we have legitimate authority. The lead stammered, tone collapsing. Sarah tilted her head with that patient look she uses on suspects who overestimate themselves. She asked for badge numbers, department authorization, supervising officer contact. Each precise question landed and exposed gaps these amateurs hadn't thought to prepare for. She keyed her radio with practiced efficiency. Dispatch, Detective 1247 requesting warrant verification for Sarah Thompson. Badge 1247. Authentic dispatch crackled back, and I watched the imposters' faces turn from nervy to terrified as their story drowned in official radio traffic. Detective 1247, negative on all warrants. No outstanding orders, came the call that obliterated their cover. Gentlemen, Sarah continued without breaking composure, you're impersonating officers with fraudulent documentation, which is multiple felonies. I'm placing you under arrest. The lead fake officer tried to bluff. Detective, there must be a procedural confusion, he said, voice quivering, sweat showing despite the cool air. Sarah gave the expression she reserves for foolish criminals. No confusion. You presented false credentials, fraudulent documents, and attempted an unlawful arrest of a police officer. The only confusion is why you thought this would work. Real backup arrived within minutes. Marked cars, trained officers who knew what they were doing. As Sarah helped secure the suspects, I inspected the fake warrant again. Wrong county code, but otherwise alarmingly accurate. They had our address down to details we don't publish. They knew Sarah's name, badge number, and routines that strangers shouldn't have been able to learn. Seeing the imposters handcuffed should have brought relief, but instead I felt deeper unease. Random criminals don't spend weeks crafting convincing counterfeit warrants and conducting sophisticated surveillance. They don't perform careful reconnaissance, mapping camera blind spots and broken locks, nor compile detailed intelligence on police schedules and family patterns. Someone had been watching us, assembling precise information for weeks or months. The real question wasn't who these imposters were anymore. That question kept me up at night. How do they know exactly when I leave for work and when Sarah's shifts begin? A week later, Detective Smith from Metro Police came to our door. Unlike the amateurs, Smith had the calm certainty of someone with experience, probably in his early 50s, patient, the kind of presence that steadies a shaken family. Sarah had called him to investigate what she described as a sophisticated impersonation operation with likely inside knowledge. I was relieved someone with real expertise was taking it seriously. Mr. Thompson, I've reviewed the evidence, Smith said, spreading crime scene photos across our kitchen table. The images made my blood run cold. Precise house layouts that weren't rough sketches but detailed diagrams, furniture placement, electrical outlets, even the location of our bedroom safe. Things we'd never told anyone. Someone with regular access to your home created these documents, he said. This isn't random criminality. This looks like systematic surveillance, done by someone you know and trust. That afternoon, our neighbor Tom Miller knocked, carrying a manila folder of what looked like technical docs. Tom, a retired electrical engineer who'd moved in 2 years earlier, had always struck me as a helpful, detail-oriented neighbor. Michael, I've reviewed my home security footage from the past few months. You need to see this, he said, opening the folder to reveal printed screenshots and meticulous notes. I've been tracking unusual activity patterns since installing a new system, he explained, presenting timestamps, visit durations, even weather and seasonal notes. Tom had inadvertently assembled a surveillance dossier. He pointed to a pattern. Karen Wells had been accessing homes during standard work hours, claiming she was conducting HOA emergency inspections for insurance compliance. She carried official-looking clipboards and had keys to many houses. I assumed it was HOA business until Monday's events forced me to reconsider. Wednesday, a breakthrough came. Detective Smith called with lab results from the documents recovered from the imposters. Mr. Thompson, we found something interesting, he said, clearly excited. The lab had detected traces of baking ingredients embedded in the paper fibers. Cake flour mixed with vanilla extract in proportions matching gourmet baking supplies. Whoever handled those documents had been baking while creating or reviewing them. That evening, like clockwork, Karen Wells arrived at our door with her weekly cookie delivery and that relentless smile I'd started to distrust. Karen was in her mid-40s, immaculately put together, with an aggressive friendliness that kept her in everyone else's business. She'd been bringing cookies every Tuesday since we moved in, claiming it was part of her HOA vice presidential community building. I found it overbearing but harmless. Sarah liked the treats, so I never questioned it. Until now. "Sarah, Michael, I brought your favorite chocolate chip cookies," she announced, overly bright. "I heard about those fake officers. How terrifying for you both. You must feel so violated." The way she said made my skin crawl. It sounded like she was fishing for details about the incident rather than offering real concern. Sarah wasn't home yet, so I kept things casual and recorded our chat on my phone. "These cookies are amazing. What flour do you use?" I asked, keeping the tone light. Karen lit up and began a polished spiel about her baking technique. "Oh, I only use special cake flour. It gives the perfect texture, and real vanilla extract. Never imitation," she said proudly. My stomach dropped. She had just confirmed the exact combination of ingredients found on the surveillance documents. That night, I told Detective Smith about Karen's inadvertent confirmation. "Mr. Thompson, this is significant circumstantial evidence," he said slowly. "But we need more concrete proof before we take action. Keep documenting. Don't confront her. If she's involved, she could be dangerous if she knows we're onto her." The next morning, Tom returned with more disturbing analysis from his security system. "Michael, I've been doing a timing analysis of Karen's visits," he said, spreading charts that looked ripped from an engineering report. "The pattern was precise. 5 visits to your house in the past month, always during your work hours, always lasting exactly 47 minutes. The regularity was chilling. Not casual snooping, but methodical entries that required a fixed time to accomplish their purpose. Still, one fact refused to make sense. What exactly did she accomplish in those 47-minute blocks? Wednesday evening brought the scene I dreaded, but expected after Monday. 3 more men in police uniforms claiming Sarah had escaped custody and needed immediate apprehension. But this time Sarah arrived fully prepared, the product of law enforcement experience, and 2 days coordinating with Detective Smith on protocols. Watching her switch into professional mode was like watching a master craftsman set up tools, practiced, precise, and unflappable. She'd activated her body camera, established backup procedures, and documented every step according to departmental standards, measures these amateurs hadn't bothered to learn. The contrast was stark. Instead of confusion and fear, Sarah radiated calm, professional authority, and total control. It was like watching a grandmaster who'd studied an opponent's previous matches and prepared the perfect counter. Then something unexpected happened that changed the neighborhood's dynamic entirely. Tom Miller was at his front window with his phone, and within minutes half the block was recording. Mrs. Patterson live-streamed from her porch. The family across the street had their teens filming from different angles. Even old Mr. Henderson, who usually keeps to himself, was documenting the scene from his driveway. The imposters found themselves not only up against a real detective, but performing their shabby act in front of an audience full of witnesses and cameras. They couldn't produce any legitimate verification and grew visibly anxious as Sarah's questions revealed how little they knew about basic police procedures. "You're claiming arrest authority without departmental authorization, proper documentation, or supervisory oversight," she said, measured and unbothered. "That is impersonation of law enforcement, a felony. I'm placing you under arrest." Watching her methodically dismantle their credibility while neighbors cheered and recorded filled me with a pride I'd never felt before. This was my wife protecting our block with expertise and real authority. Within hours, the footage circulated in neighborhood groups with headlines like "Local Detective Exposes Fake Cops," "Professional Authority versus Fake Authority, No Contest." The clip showed Sarah's precise takedown of the imposters, their panic when real procedure was applied, and the arrival of genuine backup to make arrests. Our quiet street had witnessed competence defeat and elaborate deceit, and people couldn't stop sharing how real policing had protected us. Local news picked it up that night, amplifying that message of procedural accountability. But while the neighborhood celebrated, Karen Wells stood in her yard with a notepad, studying something else. Rather than relief, she scribbled meticulous notes on response protocols, evidence handling, arrest timing, radio chatter, backup arrival intervals, and the exact questions Sarah used. Why would an ordinary neighbor need that kind of technical insight into police operations? The viral attention produced an unexpected effect. Neighbors started reporting earlier odd encounters with Karen. Mrs. Patterson said Karen had pressured her for minute-by-minute schedules for neighborhood security. The family across the street remembered invasive questions about vacations and alarm systems. Even quiet Mr. Henderson admitted Karen probed about his medical appointments and when his house would be empty. Tom cross-checked new footage and paperwork to support the widening inquiry. Michael, taken together, this shows Karen has been running systematic intelligence gathering on every family here, he said, spreading printouts across our kitchen table. She isn't merely nosy. She's building detailed profiles, vulnerabilities, routines, and entry points. That's the kind of preparation you do before coordinated criminal operations. That evening, Detective Smith came by to review the community evidence with Sarah. What started as fake police harassment appears part of a larger operation, he said, studying Tom's reports and the viral clips. Someone with significant resources and planning is targeting your family and mapping the neighborhood. Either this is a broader criminal enterprise or someone with community authority is abusing their position for gain. The most unsettling discovery came when we overlaid Karen's activity timeline with the fake police incidents. She'd been collecting detailed intelligence for months before the first imposters showed up, meaning the harassment of Sarah was only one part of a bigger plan. Karen wasn't merely adjacent to those events. She coordinated them, supplying the inside information that made those operations possible. Why would a trusted HOA officer partner with criminals to harass a detective and profile innocent families? Sarah and Smith spent the night building a strategy to gather hard evidence while keeping things low-key. We have to be extremely careful, Smith warned. If Karen is coordinating under the cover of HOA authority, she may escalate if she suspects we're onto her. For now, document everything. Keep interactions routine, and quietly collect proof for arrest and search warrants. They set up discreet interviews, preservation orders, synchronized data requests from carriers and vendors, and a resident checklist to log any contact or surveillance attempts. The network Karen used to spy on us would, piece by piece, become the trail that brought her down. Then Tom approached with one final disturbing detail from his security analysis. I've been hesitant to say this because it sounds outrageous, but Karen actually pressured me to install extra cameras aimed at your house, he admitted, visibly uncomfortable. She'd framed it as community safety and even offered to help pay, and Tom wondered how many neighbors had agreed. Why would she need 24/7 external monitoring when she already had inside access? Have you ever had a neighbor who seemed too interested in your routine? Tell me about it in the comments. Week 2, Monday. Detective Smith returned with a grim determination that told me the case had outgrown a simple harassment probe. He carried a thick manila folder and that focused energy cops bring when they're about to crack a big case. Mr. Thompson, we have authorization to search Karen Wells' residence for unauthorized entry and possible fraud, he said, holding a genuine search warrant. Correct codes, real judge, our jurisdiction. Unlike the counterfeit, this one would hold up anywhere. The past week had been methodical police work, not pretend authority. Smith had compiled Tom's footage, lab results from the flower traces, Karen's offhand admissions about baking ingredients, and neighbors' statements about her suspicious intel gathering. Careful evidence, proper procedure, airtight cases, he said as we drove toward Karen's home. That's how this is done. What we found was a suburban nightmare masquerading as community service. Her spare bedroom had been converted into an intelligence hub. Filing cabinets, wall charts, color-coded systems. Impressive until you realized the targets were her own neighbors. At the center sat a binder labeled Emergency Access Protocol, a bureaucratic manual she'd built to launder unlawful surveillance as HOA safety. Inside were master keys to 23 homes, each tagged with an address and an entry schedule. Logs listed when families left for work, how long houses remained empty, and notes on weather or seasonal factors that could affect visibility. Tom's 47-minute windows were confirmed in her records. She had perfected that interval to enter, search, and leave without detection. She'd obtained emergency keys, ran fabricated assessments, and collected intelligence. The scale went far beyond nosiness. It was sustained surveillance against people who trusted her. The photos were the worst. Private spaces cataloged, family photos, medication bottles, tax folders, insurance papers, bedside tables, diagrams of alarm zones, and camera blind spots. Seeing that level of intrusion felt like a physical shove. You assume certain boundaries with neighbors, then learn one person has been stepping over all of them for months, maybe years. Of course, Karen was gone by the time we arrived. Word spread that she'd packed suitcases and left at dawn. Mrs. Patterson said Karen's SUV left the neighborhood around 6 a.m., hours before the warrant was executed. Standing in that room of labeled keys and sterilized menace, I felt two things: relief that the truth was finally visible on paper, and revulsion at how easily trust can be weaponized. Smith kept working, cataloging drives, photographing logs, and bagging evidence that would follow her. "She can move," he muttered, "but the evidence isn't going anywhere." For the first time since this began, I believed we might finally breathe again. The timing of her disappearance suggested she'd known about the search in advance. A leak, Smith said grimly, or connections we hadn't yet identified. Someone that organized doesn't vanish without planned routes and safe places. As Smith's team finished, Sarah scanned the files, and the scope hit her hard. "Michael, this is more extensive than anything I've seen," she said. "This isn't just nosiness. It's professional intelligence work with clear objectives and real resources." The most disturbing findings came from Karen's computer. Tech specialists uncovered communications linking her operation to larger business interests. Emails with Riverside Development Group coordinating property assessments, resident profiles, and timeline tweaks keyed to investigative complications. There were references to the fake police incidents and notes about acquisition targets and residential compliance monitoring. Corporate-sounding language, not community service. Tom helped Smith align Karen's records with his external footage to build a comprehensive timeline. "Combine her internal logs with my video," Tom said, spreading charts across our kitchen table. "She's been collecting on every family for at least 18 months. This is goal-driven, not curiosity." The realization that someone entrusted with community authority had been mapping private lives for over a year was infuriating and terrifying. How many times had she entered our home when we weren't there? What had she collected about our routines, finances, vulnerabilities? The idea that we'd handed over keys and welcomed intrusions made me sick. Smith assured us her flight wouldn't stop prosecution. The evidence supported arrest warrants and major charges: breaking and entering, invasion of privacy, abuse of authority, conspiracy to commit fraud. We'll coordinate with other jurisdictions to find Karen Wells and bring her to justice. People who run operations this large don't vanish without leaving traces. The plan was straightforward: circulate warrants, flag her identifiers, follow emails, bank pings, and travel patterns. Smith's tone was calm but relentless. Karen had miscalculated. The net was tightening, and every file she'd compiled had become evidence against her. Neighbors began comparing notes, recognizing patterns in mail, knocks, and assessment notices. What looked like random nuisances now read as coordinated pressure. People prepared to testify, request protective orders, and document everything. But the investigation revealed something more disturbing than Karen's individual crimes. Links between her surveillance operation and broader business interests, with financial motives we hadn't yet grasped. Her computer showed recent contact with Riverside Development Group about accelerating acquisition timelines due to investigative complications. What business relationship did an HOA vice president have with a major developer? Tom returned with a stack of county land records that painted a picture worse than we'd feared. He showed rezoning applications. 18 months earlier, Riverside filed plans to rezone our area from residential to commercial, marking our street and adjacent blocks for acquisition and demolition to make way for luxury condos and retail. The blueprints were chilling. A community erased for profit. This wasn't random harassment. It was a local real estate scheme to force below-market sales. Tom laid out the operation like a project chart. Phase 1. Insert into HOA leadership to gain authority and keys. Phase 2. Start the emergency key program to enable snooping. Phase 3. Run coordinated harassment to push quick below-market sales. Phase 4. Coordinate with Riverside on acquisitions and displacement. The money motive was clear. In her commission deal with Riverside, Karen earned $5,000 for every $10,000 shaved off fair market value. With average homes around $300,000, dragging a sale down to $250,000 meant $15,000 extra for her on a single house. The target list covered 47 homes, over $700,000 in commissions. Every violation, every camera, every spare key was a lever in a disguised land grab, eating our block. I stared at the spreadsheets and schedules Tom spread across the table, feeling like I was reading an operations plan. Precise, cold, step by step. Detective Smith returned that evening to review the rezoning evidence and coordinate with county planning officials, who now treated this as systematic real estate fraud. This documentation transforms our understanding of Karen's operation, Smith said. We weren't just dealing with a nosy neighbor. This was coordinated fraud involving local government processes, developers, and systematic manipulation for profit. The evidence suggested Karen had already succeeded with 8 families who sold below market after months of harassment, fake violations, or tampered security systems. Sarah reviewed everything with a law enforcement eye. The systematic nature actually helps prosecution, she said, going through Tom's docs and Smith's files. When criminals operate on predictable schedules and keep records, they create trails that make conviction far more likely. Karen had essentially built the prosecution's case herself by keeping meticulous records of her crimes. Still, discovering that a trusted neighbor had been working to destroy our community for financial gain felt like betrayal on a personal level. Every friendly conversation, each cookie delivery, every helpful gesture had been part of a calculated deception to gather intelligence for displacement. Tom's research showed Karen's ties to Riverside went back 3 years. Our neighborhood wasn't her first target. Department records indicated she'd served as an HOA officer in 3 other communities over the past 4 years, all of which were redeveloped by Riverside after resident displacement and lowball acquisitions. With a pattern established, the scope of her operation was horrifying. Refined, repeatable techniques for community destruction. Week 3, Friday evening, the doorbell rang at exactly. Smith assured us her flight wouldn't stop prosecution. The evidence supported arrest warrants and major charges: breaking and entering, invasion of privacy, abuse of authority, conspiracy to commit fraud. We'll coordinate with other jurisdictions to find Karen Wells and bring her to justice. People who run operations this large don't vanish without leaving traces. The plan was straightforward. Circulate warrants, flag her identifiers, follow emails, bank pings, and travel patterns. Smith's tone was calm but relentless. Karen had miscalculated. The net was tightening, and every file she'd compiled had become evidence against her. Neighbors began comparing notes, recognizing patterns in mail, knocks, and assessment notices. What looked like random nuisances now read as coordinated pressure. People prepared to testify, request protective orders, and document everything. But the investigation revealed something more disturbing than Karen's individual crimes. Links between her surveillance operation and broader business interests with financial motives we hadn't yet grasped. Her computer showed recent contact with Riverside Development Group about accelerating acquisition timelines due to investigative complications. What business relationship did an HOA vice president have with a major developer? Tom returned with a stack of county land records that painted a picture worse than we'd feared. He showed rezoning applications. 18 months earlier, Riverside filed plans to rezone our area from residential to commercial, marking our street and adjacent blocks for acquisition and demolition to make way for luxury condos and retail. The blueprints were chilling, a community erased for profit. This wasn't random harassment. It was a local real estate scheme to force below-market sales. Tom laid out the operation like a project chart. Phase 1. Insert into HOA leadership to gain authority and keys. Phase 2. Start the emergency key program to enable snooping. Phase 3. Run coordinated harassment to push quick below-market sales. Phase 4. Coordinate with Riverside on acquisitions and displacement. The money motive was clear. In her commission deal with Riverside, Karen earned $5,000 for every $10,000 shaved off fair market value. With average homes around $300,000, dragging a sale down to $250,000 meant $15,000 extra for her on a single house. The target list covered 47 homes, over $700,000 in commissions. Every violation, every camera, every spare key was a lever in a disguised land grab, eating our block. I stared at the spreadsheets and schedules Tom spread across the table, feeling like I was reading an operations plan. Precise, cold, step by step. Detective Smith returned that evening to review the rezoning evidence and coordinate with county planning officials, who now treated this as systematic real estate fraud. This documentation transforms our understanding of Karen's operation, Smith said. We weren't just dealing with a nosy neighbor. This was coordinated fraud involving local government processes, developers, and systematic manipulation for profit. The evidence suggested Karen had already succeeded with 8 families who sold below market after months of harassment, fake violations, or tampered security systems. Sarah reviewed everything with a law enforcement eye. The systematic nature actually helps prosecution, she said, going through Tom's docs and Smith's files. When criminals operate on predictable schedules and keep records, they create trails that make conviction far more likely. Karen had essentially built the prosecution's case herself by keeping meticulous records of her crimes. Still, discovering that a trusted neighbor had been working to destroy our community for financial gain felt like betrayal on a personal level. Every friendly conversation, each cookie delivery, every helpful gesture had been part of a calculated deception to gather intelligence for displacement. Tom's research showed Karen's ties to Riverside went back 3 years. Our neighborhood wasn't her first target. Department records indicated she'd served as an HOA officer in 3 other communities over the past 4 years, all of which were redeveloped by Riverside after resident displacement and lowball acquisitions. With a pattern established, the scope of her operation was horrifying. Refined, repeatable techniques for community destruction. Week 3, Friday evening, the doorbell rang at exactly